So we're making this short film to hopefully inspire you about the heart, to learn about the heart while being creative too. And I'm Dr. Lizzie Burns, so I'm both a scientist and an artist, and I've been creating these drawings to show you the heart. I'm going to be joined by a pathologist, and I wonder if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Dr. Esther Youd. I'm a histopathologist, which basically means I look down a microscope, looking at pieces of tissue or cells, and I sometimes do autopsies to find out why somebody dies.
Brilliant, thank you, Esther. So what we're going to do is I'm going to encourage you to colour or fold while I ask Esther lots of questions as well, which maybe you'll be thinking about at the same time. It's going to be in two parts, so you could either watch the first part or both parts. It's up to you. It could be an activity. The first one will be colouring in. So if you've got either one or two sheets showing the heart, and what we'll do is I'll be colouring. So if you join me colouring, and I'll be asking Esther questions, and we'll also be able to see some pictures as well. So if you first of all start with a picture showing the inside of the heart, that's where we're going to begin. Right, and have you got any pictures to show us? I'm going to direct this down and get colouring. Maybe I should colour upside down actually. The things we're learning at this time. So Esther, where is the heart? What does it do? Why is it important? All these questions I want to ask you.
The heart is in your chest, and it's probably one of the most important organs of the body because it keeps you alive. It pumps blood around the body, so it receives blood from the lungs, which has oxygenated the blood. And oxygen is really important because it provides sustenance to the tissues around the body. So the heart receives that oxygenated blood and it pumps it then all around the body to all of the other organs so that they get the oxygen that they need to be able to work.
And how often does our heart sort of beat? What's the sort of normal heart?
It probably beats 60 to 70 beats per minute. And when you exercise, then it will beat more hardly and more frequently because it's coping with providing more oxygen and more blood to your muscles which are exercising. But at rest, it's about 60 to 70 beats a minute.
Brilliant. And what are all these different? Are we looking at a picture of the inside of the heart? What are all these different areas? I guess you've heard of chambers, but can you explain more what's going on? It looks very complicated.
So yes, so here we're looking at the inside of the heart. So we're looking at basically the heart cut in two so that you can see the inside, and you can see the various chambers of the heart and the inflow and outflow of where the blood is coming into the heart and then going out. So there are four main chambers. There's two at the top called atria. So this is the right atrium here, and this is the left atrium over here. And then the biggest chambers are called the ventricles. This is the right ventricle, and then the left ventricle over here. And we see how blood comes into the heart through these tubes into the right atrium, then down into the right ventricle, where it's then pumped up through here, the pulmonary artery, and goes into the lungs to receive oxygen. And then on the other side, the blood comes back in from the lungs into the left atrium. It comes down here into the left ventricle, where it's pumped out of the heart into the aorta and then all around the body.
And it looks a bit different. Am I right? It looks a bit different. On one side, it looks a bit kind of broader, a bit of a different shape. Is that right? Is there any reason for that?
Yeah, so the right side of the heart is much smaller than the left side of the heart, particularly the ventricles. So the left ventricle here is a lot thicker. The wall of it's a lot thicker than on the right side. And that's because the right ventricle only has to pump blood out here into the lungs. And the lungs are really, really close to the heart, so it doesn't need to go very far. So you don't need a lot of muscle to pump it very hard to reach the lungs. Whereas on the left side of the heart, the blood here is oxygenated, so it's come from the lungs, it's got lots of oxygen in it, and it's ready to go all around the body. So you need a really big, thick muscle wall to be able to pump the blood to all the far reaches of the body.
Brilliant. Wow. So it is just almost a big muscle that's moving away all the time.
Yeah, constantly squeezing and pumping blood about every second all around your body.
Have you got? I know you've got a nice sort of. It's a computer simulation of a beating heart. Are you able to show that? I seem to.
There we go.
Slightly gruesome, but kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can see how it's squeezing constantly. And there's a rhythm to it. So the blood squeezes down from the atria here into the ventricle there, and then out again. And so this squeezes just before this squeezes. So there's a rhythm to it.
Wow. And is that what's giving the beating sound that we can hear?
Yes, but the sound mostly comes from the functioning of the valves. The valves are these bits here that sit in between the atria and the ventricles. And also there's another valve here you can see, which is between the ventricle and the pulmonary artery, where it's going out of the heart. And there's another one on the left side. And it's when these valves close that it causes a disruption in the flow and therefore a sound. So that gives you your beating.
And can you explain what a hole in the heart is? What's that about? That's something that we hear about sometimes. Is that mostly for children? What can go wrong?
Yeah, people can be born with a hole in their heart. And that is where you've got an abnormal connection between two of the chambers. So sometimes it might be between the two atria, and we call that an intraatrial defect. Or it can be between the ventricles. So here, between the left and right ventricle. And what that does is means that blood can flow the wrong way through the heart. And so it can cause problems, and the best way to deal with that is to close the hole, and then you don't tend to have problems afterwards.
Wow. It's kind of amazing that someone could survive that for any time at all, or is it just about managing ish and it's just a bit tricky?
Yeah, different patients are different, so it all depends on the individual circumstances. But a lot of the time, actually, the heart compensates quite well. But it would be best not to have to compensate. So hence, having surgery to close the hole is the best plan.
So the heart's all about pushing the blood around in the right direction. Is that what the valves are for?
Yeah, the valves make sure that the blood is in the right place at the right time. So it enters the atrium first, and then it then passes through the valve and into the ventricle, and the valve then prevents the blood going backwards into the atrium. It makes sure that it flows the right way to go out of the heart, either to the lungs or around the body.
Fantastic. Right, I've been colouring away. I hope you have too. I should have said, that you're very welcome to be unrealistic in your colours. I've been doing them a little bit realistic, but you're welcome to do them in whatever way you want. So I think I've coloured in now the middle of the heart, the inside. Can we look now on the outside, Esther, and see what's going on there? Oh, what's going on there? So find your outside drawing, and again, you can use whatever colours you want, really. But I'm going to do realistic-ish, but it doesn't matter. So if you can explain what's this outside of the heart? What are those things on the outside that I can see? And is this a photo of a real heart as well?
Yeah, so on the right hand side you've got a photograph of a real heart, and on the left you've got a diagram that you can colour in. And they both show what the outside of the heart looks like. And the first thing to notice is the colour of the heart, I guess. And you've got two main colours here. You've got yellow areas and you've got more pinkish purple areas. The yellow areas are areas of fat. And it's normal to have fat on the outside of the heart. It varies from one person to another, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything if you've got more fat on the outside of your heart than somebody else. And it provides an important role in supporting and protecting the coronary arteries, which are arteries that supply blood to the heart itself. So the heart is a big muscle. It's pumping blood all around the body, but it also needs blood and oxygen to survive. So the coronary arteries are these arteries that run on the surface of the heart. And I'm pointing to one on the picture of the real heart on the right. And you can see on the diagram as well, these arteries snaking along and branching to supply blood to the heart.
Wow. So that's because the heart's such a busy muscle. It needs its own, I guess it needs its own blood supply to keep busy and active.
Yeah, it's working really, really hard. So it needs lots of regular blood supply and regular oxygen.
And what keeps your heart beating? I mean, does it just beat all by itself, or is there a way it's that beat is working and responding as well to your activity?
Yeah, it pretty much does beat by itself. It's one of the really strange things about the heart. You can remove the heart from the body. If somebody was to have a heart transplant, for example, you can take a heart out of one person's body and put it into another person's body.
Wow.
All that time, the heart is beating by itself.
God.
So it has this system of transferring electrical activity in order to cause the cells to contract and the whole muscle to contract regularly, and it keeps going even outside the body for a while.
Wow. And what's a heart attack? We've all heard about heart attacks. Are you able to explain what goes on?
Yeah, a heart attack happens when you have an interruption of the blood supply to the heart. So one of these arteries, if it was to become blocked, then you stop the blood supply to an area of the heart. So if, for example, you had a blockage here, then all of these, this section of heart muscle down here that's been supplied by that artery would suddenly no longer receive blood and oxygen, and therefore that section of heart would die, and that's a heart attack. And that's usually caused by where you have disease in the artery. You get buildup of fat and fatty tissues within the artery wall, often called furring up of the arteries. And that can narrow the artery, so prevent the blood from getting through smoothly. And you can develop a blood clot on top of that fatty plaque. And the blood clot occludes the artery completely, stops the blood flow, and therefore causes a heart attack.
Gosh, and how does that happen? How does that fat build up? Is it the person's lifestyle, or is it just something that inevitably happens?
It's not inevitable. So you can go all the way through your life, live to be 100 and have very little or no coronary artery disease. So it really is about what we do to ourselves and to the heart that causes it. So if, for example, we eat too much fatty food, if we put on lots of weight, if we smoke cigarettes, all of these things cause damage to the arteries and cause this buildup of fatty plaques in the arteries. There's also some people who are affected by an inherited disease where they produce too much cholesterol and therefore are at higher risk of developing these fatty plaques.
So how can we make sure that we do our very best to be looking after our hearts? What would you suggest we could all be doing ideally?
Yeah. Best way to look after your heart is to make sure that you eat healthily, you eat a balanced diet with not too much fat, that you take regular exercise so that you don't become overweight, and most important, that you don't smoke.
And what's a triple bypass, a triple heart bypass? Something that lots of people often say, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so when you have disease of the coronary arteries and it's building up and narrowing these arteries, it can get to a point where it's causing somebody angina, which is where you get pain in the heart related to poor blood supply. So it's not that you've had a complete heart attack, but the blood supply isn't enough to be able to keep the heart pumping well, and it is crying out for help, and so you get pain. And when people have this, they will often have a scan that has a look at how narrowed the arteries are, and if they are critically narrowed, then one treatment is that you can have a coronary artery bypass graft, and that is where an extra piece of blood vessel, usually a vein, is taken from another place in the body, usually from the legs, and is inserted into the heart to bypass the areas of the arteries that are narrowed, to hopefully then restore a really good blood supply to the heart.
Wow, astonishing, isn't it? What's possible?
Yeah.
So I hope you've joined me and that you've coloured your inside and outside of your heart. So one thing that you can do with your drawings, you could cut them out, and maybe they're about life size, so maybe you could hold them up against yourself. You could also cut them out and you'll find that they overlap. So you could have your picture of the heart on the outside and picture of the heart on the inside, and put just a little bit of tape, and you could lift one up and look inside. Another thing you could do is also surround it by how to look after your heart, some of the healthy lifestyle that Esther's talked about, or maybe a heart that's not well, and thinking about what that person's done to make their heart unhealthy. So we hope that that's helped you learn about the real human heart, think about your own, how remarkable and amazing it is, while being creative at the same time. So that's the end of part 1. We're about to go on to part 2.